Hey, this is Todd Brown. I've got a cool little training video for you. In this video, I want to share with you the difference between the way the pro marketer approaches customer acquisition and back-end monetization compared to the amateur. I want to show you why and how a pro marketer would happily pay double for the cost of acquiring a single new customer. Now, let's say this is the amateur over here, and this is the pro marketer over here. And let's say that to acquire a single new customer, the amateur is willing to spend $125, where the pro is willing to spend $250. Now, let's say both of these, the amateur and the pro, are selling a product on the front end. Front end is customer acquisition. The front end is a marketing campaign that's designed to turn prospects into new buyers, new customers. Let's say they are both selling a product for $250. Now, because the amateur, like the typical mom and pop entrepreneur, they think profit. They want to generate profit on every single transaction, whether it's a front-end transaction, a transaction with a brand new customer, or back-end. The amateur wants to acquire or generate profit. They think transactionally. They think every transaction should have a certain margin. So in this case, let's say the amateur wants to maintain a 50% margin. That means if they are selling a product for $250, they're only willing to spend half of that to acquire a new customer. That is $125. So in this case, let's say that the amateur, because they're only willing to spend $125 to acquire a customer, let's say that they acquire 5 customers. And so they acquire 5 customers at a cost of $125 each. That means that they spent $625 to acquire those 5 customers. But now let's say, of course, that they're selling a $250 product. And so at 5 customers, $250 means that they generated $1,250 in revenue. We really should have done that in a different color, right? So this is revenue over here, and this is, oops, it should be red. This should be their cost. Cost $625, whereas over here, revenue of $1,250, right? And so that means that the amateur over here on the front end generated $625 of profit. $1,250 minus $625. Now let's take a look at the front end for the pro. So let's do this. Let's go back to this kind of red color and say over here, because the pro was willing to spend $250, double the amount of money that the amateur was willing to spend to acquire a customer. Let's say that the pro acquires 10 customers. So that's 10 customers times $250 in cost to acquire this customer, right? That means that the pro spent $2,500 to acquire those 10 customers. Remember, in this case, over here, the amateur only spent $625 to acquire 5 customers. The pro spent $2,500 to acquire 10 customers. But now, we also have the other side of the equation. So we've got 10 customers at $250 each, right? That means $2,500 in revenue. And obviously you can see over here, if we do this, let's do this in black, that there is $0 of profit. So this is front end profit for the amateur. They're already up $625. For the pro, right, they have $0 of profit. $625 versus 0. On the surface, if you only look at the front end and you only look at these transactions, if you only look at this transactionally like an amateur does, you would say, well, the amateur is doing great because they're up $625. But now let's say over the next year, over the next 12 months, on the back end, that's all the transactions, all the marketing and transactions that occur with existing customers. That means that these 5 people, they came in on the front end, and now they're down here in the back end marketing. They're receiving ongoing marketing campaigns and promotions designed for customers. Now let's say that the average customer spends $1,500 over the next year. And that's the case in both of these businesses. So let's keep it the same and say $1,500. The average customer spends $1,500 over the next year for the pro. The average customer spends $1,500 over the next year for the amateur. Now, over here, the amateur got 5 customers, remember, in this case. And so that's $7,500 in back-end revenue. Over here, the pro got 10 customers at $1,500 is $15,000 of back-end revenue. But over here, remember, we've got some profit from the front end for the amateur. The amateur generated $625 of profit on the front end, plus this $7,500 over here. That means that the amateur generated $8,125 of profit. If we look at the pro generated 0 in profit on the front end, but because they had 10 customers double enter the back end, they had $15,000 of profit on the back end. So you understand, this is a 184.62% increase in profit. $8,125 versus $15,000. This is an example of why pro marketers do not look at their business transactionally. They recognize that the pro recognizes that the front end is really just a machine to acquire customers. And the job of that front end is to pump people into the back end. And that's why the pro is willing to spend more to put a customer on this conveyor belt, knowing that the real money in the business is on the back end. Whereas the amateur is looking at this as a source of profit, right? And so because of that, they're willing to spend less to get a customer onto this conveyor belt. To them, this is about generating profit here and profit here. But because the pro recognizes that the front end, is just a machine to pump people onto the back end, that's why we were able to see that 184.62% increase in profit, even though the pro spent double the amount of money to acquire a single new customer. This is the kind of stuff that we talk about in Acquire and Monetize. You can find that at acquireandmonetize.com. This is extremely important. It's important that you do not think transactionally, but instead you recognize the purpose and objective of the front end. And that is mass customer acquisition, so more people get dumped onto this bad boy. This is where the profit is made, not here. And so you should be willing to spend the maximum amount of money possible to acquire maximum amount of new customers to feed this machine. And so there you go. Enjoy.